Now, for more insight, we welcome to studio Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Dr. Shay Har-Zvi, Senior Fellow at the Institute for Policy and Strategy at Reichman University and former Acting Director General in the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Thank you so much for being here in studio. We see the dramatic images out of Gaza right now, those airstrikes continuing. You heard the update from my colleague Ariel Levin-Waldman about the elimination of terror commanders. It's a complicated fight right now because of the terror tunnels underground. Talk to us about the strategy for the Israeli troops right now, how they are navigating the terrain above ground and underground right now to achieve their goals.
First, we must remember that we have two main goals in this war. First, to eliminate Hamas, meaning that to take off all their military capabilities and make sure that they won't be able to stay in the Gaza Strip any longer after the war. This is one goal, and the second goal is to bring back all the hostages. Those are two main goals. They are equal goals, and we should see how one goal actually serves the other one. This is one thing. Second, we see that the IDF operates actually has a lot of success in the last few days. Continue to his operation slowly. This is very important, not to have a lot of injuries, not to have a lot of soldiers killed, but at the end of the day, we are approaching Shifa Hospital. We are approaching the main tactical headquarters of the Hamas. This is the important thing, and this is one thing. And on the other, we allow the population to go from the north to the south, to allow the IDF to operate without the population, meaning no casualties, no civilians that are actually not involved in the fighting going to the south. And I think in the coming few days, this might be a very crucial moment for those two channels. One thing, I believe that in a few days we'll approach Shifa Hospital. This is one thing, and we know that the main Hamas leaders are actually under Shifa Hospital. And the other end, we should remember there are negotiations in Qatar. The head of the CIA, the head of the Mossad were in Qatar. The leader of Qatar today is going to Egypt. So there are a lot of negotiations regarding the hostages. So actually, there are two channels that are going forward, but there are always a connection between them.
We've heard repeatedly comparisons that Hamas is the same as ISIS. Some even saying Hamas is worse than ISIS. Depends on your vantage point. Your insights right now about that perception as this operation continues right now. You're talking about a terror command center underneath a hospital. This is a civilian hospital above a structure that Israel needs to target, and do it soon.
I think the fact that the West, President Biden and other leaders said from the beginning that Hamas is actually equal to the ISIS, in even worse than, is crucial point, because what is the meaning of that? The meaning is quite simple from my point of view, that as the West try to eliminate ISIS, Israel actually has the same legitimacy to eliminate Hamas, if I may say, from James Bond's film, License to Kill, meaning license to destroy the organization, because it's not only a terror organization, this is ISIS, the worst thing that actually came in the last few years. So this is quite very important. This is actually what gives us the legitimacy from the West. It's quite a legitimacy to continue with the war, I think, for quite a few weeks from now.
Talk to us about the regional and global implications of the war right now. Overnight, there was a drone sent from Syria towards Eilat. There have been attempts out of Yemen to target Israel, also Eilat. This might surprise many people who think that the fighting is just centered around the Gaza Strip and potentially out of Lebanon. Break down for us what this all means from the broader Middle East region.
I think President Biden has understood it from the beginning, and actually everyone understands that the outcome of the war will have a lot of implication for the whole Middle East. And the war is not only between Israel and Hamas. Actually, it's a broader war which has a regional implication, even global implication. Actually, it's a war between one camp, the liberal camp led by the United States, the European and the moderate Arab countries, and on the other end, the radical axis, which Russia, China, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and all their proxies in the region. So actually, it's a global. It's not a global war, but it's a global confrontation actually. And what we see in the last few days is, on the one hand, Iran tries not to get Hezbollah too much involved in the fighting. There are a lot of there's some, of course, if Hezbollah is firing, but the organization is making sure don't to escalate too much the war against Israel. Don't go to wide, large scale.
Why not?
I will answer it in a minute. But what we see, the Iranians, on the other hand, using all the proxies in the region, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, actually to attack the American forces in the region, to attack Israel. So trying to show us that we have a lot of capabilities to attack you, not only from the north. Why Iran is not using a Hezbollah to go for a large-scale war? I think because two things. First, Iran, actually we say it for a long time, saving Hezbollah from their point of view, when someone will try to attack their nuclear capabilities. So Hezbollah is their asset, their strategic asset, actually, mainly against Israel, but who knows, maybe against other forces in the region. So from the Iranian point of view, it is not the time to use Hezbollah. The critical moment from my point of view might be if Hezbollah in Iran feel that Israel is going really to eliminate Hamas. And what is the meaning of that? The meaning of that actually the radical axis is not anymore Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Actually, there are only Iran and Hezbollah and there are other proxies because Hamas is eliminated. And then we should see what will be the reaction of Iran and Hezbollah if such a development will occur.
Stay with us. We're going to discuss more about exactly that threat, that axis of terror, so to speak. But first, let's find out exactly what is happening on the ground. We go to our correspondent, Mary McAuliffe, and she joins us from northern Israel. So you heard us talking right now about the concerns that remain around Hezbollah's next moves, Mary, if it will in fact get fully involved in the war. What is the latest where you are? What can you tell us?
Absolutely, Benita. So we hear the ongoing sounds of booms coming from the Israeli side of the border into southern Lebanon. Lebanese media reporting ongoing Israeli strikes using artillery in the areas of Ramiyah and Bet Lef. This is an area that we saw heavily targeted yesterday by Israeli airstrikes. The IDF said last night that it was continuing to launch different targets belonging to Hezbollah, both infrastructure and personnel belonging to that group. We saw a number of different strikes from mortar attacks being launched across the border into Israeli community, mostly at IDF military areas and personnel, but also some of those setting off sirens in these border communities. Yesterday, the IDF said that it was targeting in response a number of different compounds, observation posts, and technological assets belonging to the group as it does continue to strike these. But as you've been discussing in studio, it's become a very formulaic situation that we're seeing here on the border. Hezbollah launching these attacks, anti-tank missile attacks, mostly at the IDF military areas, and then IDF responding. Seems an unwillingness from both sides to escalate this war any further on the northern front for now, but it's certainly a situation that we are keeping our eyes on here, and there's certainly continue to be deaths in this area. At least 81 people have died on the Lebanese side of the border. The vast majority of those are members of Hezbollah, also other Palestinian terror groups, but of course also a score of civilians. Also this week, an Israeli civilian was killed by an attack on very near the border, traveling in this area. So we definitely continue this to be a very heated area, and Hezbollah, for its part, also publishing footage of what it says was its targeting of IDF personnel along the border a couple days ago. We do not have a comment from the IDF about that video or that incident.
And Mary, Israel also carrying out strikes in Syria overnight in response to that drone attack on a school in Eilat, that of course is the country's most southernmost city and a resort town, and also a place where many families have been evacuated from southern communities from the kibbutzim and the moshavim that were targeted on the 7th of October. They're now staying in Eilat. What more is known about what unfolded?
That's right, Benita. So this drone, as you said, it hit a school in a lab. There were people in the building at the time, but in the basement, and we don't have any reports of injuries, but there was significant damage caused by this drone. And it was probably one of the most significant successful attacks that traveled the furthest range to hit this city in the southernmost city, traveling, the IDF says, from southern Syria, so over 250 miles at least from inside southern Syria to hit this city in a lot. The IDF said that it was responding forcefully to the source of the attack inside southern Syria, but it did not specify who was behind the attack. Only yesterday just saying that they believe the drone was of a foreign origin. So we do not know much. We do know the IDF has been conducting a number of strikes in Syria over the past few weeks, also, of course, the past few years, but we have seen once again an escalation in these number of strikes. This week also saw strikes by the United States into Syria as we continue to see these attacks on dozens of U.S. bases who continue to be attacked by these Iranian-backed proxies who are doing so in the name of the Palestinian people, saying that this is part of also their resistance, launching dozens of attacks. So it's not just Israel under attack here in the region. The United States also trying to grapple with these attacks, but also trying to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. We've only had at least 2 airstrikes by the U.S. forces, but as I mentioned, there have been dozens of attacks on bases housing U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq.
Thank you so much, correspondent Mary McAuliffe, live from northern Israel. More from Mary, of course, in the coming hours. Still with me in studio, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Dr. Shay, HarZvi. So you heard the report, the developments out of Syria, the developments out of southern Lebanon. We were talking earlier about Yemen, bases in Iraq, this axis. These Iranian proxies, they are active right now.
Yeah, actually, because from the Iranian point of view, they must do something. And we've talked before that they don't want to escalate the situation with Hezbollah. Therefore, this is why they are using their proxies in the region. I really don't know. And there is the point that we have to retaliate. And this is why we attack in Syria, and it might be that the United States will decide to attack in other places in Iraq or even in Yemen in the future if they continue to launch rockets, surface-to-surface missiles or drones towards Israel or towards U.S. bases in the region. But actually, this is not the real game. The real game actually is going on in Gaza. This is what we should keep in our mind all the time. Make sure that there is no other front in Judea and Samaria and in the north, and we should continue our work successfully as we are doing in the last few days in Gaza. This is the main battle. This is why we're, from our point of view, we are not trying to escalate the situation in other fronts, just to make sure that there is no surprises over there. This is, I think, that the IDF and the Shabak is doing a wonderful job in the Judea and Samaria to make sure that there are no terror attacks, and there were almost no terror attacks, and we have arrested, I think, more than 1,000 Hamas people in the last few weeks. Meaning, see how Hamas succeeds in the last few years actually to move also to Judea and Samaria and to operate from there. So it demonstrates, I think, that from our point of view, it is crucial. Not only from our point of view, as I said, from the United States and from all the other Arab moderate countries. Actually, it's quite crucial that we will succeed in our mission to eliminate Hamas.
The new top American general says Israel's goal of toppling Hamas, and it's a quote, is a pretty large order. What do you see into the U.S. support? Certainly, the president has been here during wartime. The U.S. Secretary of State has been here several times. The CIA director has been here and, as you said, is involved in talks in terms of hostages. What do you make of the U.S. support of Israel right now, particularly if things do escalate up north?
First, I think the U.S. really wants that the things in the north do not escalate. And this is why they send the 3 carriers to the region, 2 in the Middle East and one in the Gulf, to make sure to deter Iran and Hezbollah don't to escalate. And I think the most important thing, and I said it before, that we have the same strategic goal with the United States, to eliminate Hamas, because they understand, as we do, the regional implication of the war. But we have some debates about humanitarian aid, but debate. We are talking about debates. We're not really different strategic goals. And this is the important thing that we should keep in our mind. We have the same strategic goal as the US, or the US has the same strategic goal as Israel. And this is the most important. This is why they gave us a lot of assistance from the beginning of the war. And I'm quite sure that they continue to do it as much as we need. But what they are asking us, help us to help you. Meaning, if you give a humanitarian aid or humanitarian corridor, it will help us to give you the legitimacy as long as you need, or for at least for the coming few weeks, to continue to do your job in the Gaza Strip.
And also, obviously, to try and secure the freedom of the 239 hostages still being held by the terror group, still unimaginable, nearly 5 weeks in. Stay with us. There's more to discuss, because there are many disturbing questions being raised about the media coverage on the 7th of October. A bombshell investigation by the NGO called Honest Reporting, suggesting that photojournalists in Gaza may have known in advance about the attacks. Questions are raised as to how some of these photographers were on the scene as the attacks were unfolding. As our senior correspondent Owen Altman reports, it's sparking questions about the role of some journalists in this conflict, while sparking anger across Israel. Let's take a look.
Pictures of the October 7th massacre, not only from Hamas perpetrators, not only from Israeli survivors, but also here from photojournalists entering Israel from Gaza, the subject of a report out Wednesday from the pro-Israel watchdog group Honest Reporting.
What were they doing there so early on what would ordinarily have been a quiet Saturday morning? Was it coordinated with Hamas? Did the respectable wire services, which published their photos, approve of their presence inside enemy territory, together with the terrorist infiltrators?
The central questions are about the role of a journalist. At what point is a journalist too cozy with a terrorist organization? And at what point must a journalist step out and prevent a war crime? At the expense of that journalist's core role, documenting events and explaining reality.
They were there. They witnessed terrorist attacks, these people. And instead of trying to stop these terrorist attacks, they photographed them to the world. They did things that were unethical.
One photographer, a freelancer working with AP, seems to have relished the attack, and here is seen smiling with Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza.
If there were journalists who knew about the massacre, who stayed quiet and filmed while children were being massacred, they are no different from the terrorists and will share the same fate.
There, senior Israeli leader Benny Gantz drawing his conclusion Thursday, with a unit of the Israeli Prime Minister's office calling the photographers, quote, partners in crimes against humanity, and asking media outlets for clarification, as Israelis focus their anger at those they see as Hamas's helpers.
Still in studio, Lieutenant Colonel in the reserves, Dr. Shay Har-Zvi. What do you make of this? It is quite astounding
it's an
to watch this.
Unbelievable story, and there are a lot of questions that should be answered. First, regarding the broadcast networks, what they knew. The journalists were employed by those networks. This is one thing, but the other question is even more bothering. Did they know about the attack? What they did during the attack?
How were they there so early on in the developments?
8 o'clock, around
security
8 o'clock.
teams weren't there. Israel's intelligence wasn't there. Israel's security teams weren't there, but they were photojournalists.
Yeah, and I think that Benny Gantz said that everyone actually who knew or didn't try to stop it actually deserved the same fate as the terrorists. And but I don't want to determine at the moment. We should make sure what they knew, what they did, what the networks knew before and after, and what they are doing. But it should raise a lot of questions for the ethical, not only from the ethical point of view, but actually they were. It might be that they were part in some manner for these terrible events that happened a month ago, 5 weeks ago.
And you see a photograph of a photographer hugging and kissing Yahya Sinwar. It really is quite phenomenal. It really is something that needs to be looked into. And if we'll bring it up on our screen right now, you're looking at that. And Yahya Sinwar is kissing the journalist who is taking photographs on the scene. Look how he is on the camera there. You can see he is right there on the scene as this is unfolding. It really is sparking a lot of questions and understandably a lot of anger as well. We are seeing so many demonstrations across the globe, many of them anti-Israel demonstrations. Do you see in your mind how an image like that impacts the way the world is seeing what is unfolding right now? Are you surprised at the way, broadly speaking, you are seeing these kinds of demonstrations against Israel, despite the images that we're looking at the screens and the updates that we're getting, Hamas actually videoing those attacks as they happen, and yet the demonstrations are anti-Israel in many parts of the world right now?
Unfortunately, I'm not surprised, because we've seen in the last few years the anti-Semitism movement, anti-Semitism attitude towards Israel is going up and up in the last few years, and the anti-Israel sentiment goes up very rapidly in the last few years. And what encouraged me at the end of the day, we know that there is a difference between some parts of the public, the radical left, the radical right, and the leaders who actually know exactly what is going on and they support us. But this is something that we have to look after the war, because at some time the war is going to finish. We have to be very careful and to be aware what is going on in the public, because we know that the young generation, actually their attitude towards Israel is quite negative. And those generation, the young generation, in the coming 10, 20 years will be in a very, very important position. So we have to look after it.
10 seconds left. Your level of optimism looking forward at how this is going to all end. Your take, very briefly.
I think I'm very optimistic, because the IDF operates very carefully, very successfully, and in the coming few days we have a chance not only to continue the war successfully in Gaza, but also to bring the hostages, maybe not all of them, but at least part of them.
Certainly everybody hoping all hostages will be brought home safely. Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Dr. Shay, HarZvi, thank you so much.